Welcome to the Tourism AI Network podcast, the podcast where we talk about all things at the intersection of artificial intelligence and tourism. Today, Matthew, Kendel, and I are going to be diving into a number of pretty fascinating topics, some of which are less directly related to tourism than others. However, all I think are topics that people in the tourism industry should be paying attention to. And I think the first one especially is one that is quite interesting from a number of different perspectives. And I think as a tourism organization, I think one that people should take pause on and think hard about. But with that, Kendall, I'll pass it off to you to introduce some topics.
Absolutely. So I feel like this episode really has been a long time coming because, about a year ago, I think our organization was looking at diving into a tool for our own organization. And we were really kind of torn at that time between Claude and ChatGPT. And I think as an organization, or at least you and I, like Claude, but because most of our clients were in ChatGPT, we made the decision to kind of go all in there and be on the same tool that we were kind of teaching our clients on. But recently, we made the decision to fully switch over to Claude because just the benefits kind of outweigh. I think as a team, we're just discovering how amazing it is. So this episode is really all about Claude. And some of the main topics we're going to be starting with come because you just wrote kind of two interesting blogs. One that will be up on our website this week and one that's going out on our newsletter next week. So stay tuned to read those. But the first one is about Anthropic's new approach to AI ethics. And like you said, this might actually change how tourism operators, think about AI adoption. And then the other one is kind of this new craze right now that is total AI hype, and it could be a security nightmare. So we are going to dig into that as well. Also touch on, how you used Claude Code on a high altitude airplane ride, which we did talk about in our episode last week, but we'll just touch on that again. And then chat with Matthew about how he has automated a pretty big piece of his workflow. So really curious to dig in there. So let's get started with the first kind of topic here, and that is writing your AI constitution, based on Anthropic's new approach, what we can learn from that. So it was a really interesting article you wrote, Peter, and it basically is all about Claude's new constitution, which is a 23,000 word blueprint on how Claude should behave and why. So you called this a fascinating document worth reading, and you were actually just talking to us about the podcast you listened to as well. What kind of caught your attention when you first read Claude's constitution?
Yeah. So this document is so first of all, it's not really a new approach for Claude per se, although it's an evolution of an approach. So Claude has always been a little bit different from other AI companies in that they've believed strongly in this concept of constitutional AI right from the very beginning. So just for everybody's background and benefit, really constitutional AI is different in the way companies train AI models and sort of reinforce how AI models work, because basically constitutional AI, conceptually is just you sort of write a constitution, you write a set of rules, and those are the rules that the AI model is supposed to follow. Most other AI tools are actually supported or built with a process called reinforcement learning from human feedback. And really what that process is they build the model, they train the model, and then the model responds, and humans basically give it feedback on how it responded and whether it responded ethically, whether it responded correctly, how to adjust its response. And they go through kind of a fine-tuning process of training through that process. And so, those are very different approaches if you think about it, because really, if you think about human, reinforcement from human feedback is the model then just tries to figure out how to answer in the way it thinks the humans want it to answer. And so you can see how there's a lot of, I would say, interpretation in that kind of situation. And there could be some bias in that situation. And there could be some lack of clarity in that situation. And so it's not a sort of a, kind of as fundamental and foundational as a constitutional approach, which is, here's the Constitution. Think about the U.S. Constitution. Now, obviously, that can get misinterpreted many ways, but conceptually, at least, it's like, here's a set of things we all agree on. Here's a set of way of behaving we all agree on. Here's the things that we believe are most important, and we're going to kind of abide by those things, right? So conceptually, that's what constitutional AI is. And, Claude's original constitution was about a tenth of the length of this, and really it was just a set of rules to follow. So much more of a black and white kind of set of rules to follow, whereas the new constitution is actually like 23,000 words, as you mentioned. And so it's got that set of rules, but it's also got some why you want to follow those set of rules. And so that's really what made it stand out to me as a document, because, I think if you, just like humans, right? So if somebody says, here's the rule, my children are the best examples. They hate stupid rules, hate them. Like, get really angry really fast. And like, well, why is that rule? We went to a soccer game once, and they made us dump out the water before we go to security just to fill our water on the other side. And like my son lost his mind, right? But if you can understand the why the rules there, okay, well, maybe somebody once tried to bring in some liquids that could create a bomb or something along those lines. Now, I'm not going to get into how ridiculous that rule is today, but regardless, at least if you understand why the rule's in place, you can kind of get behind and kind of like follow the rule with a little bit more ease, right? So that was the big foundational difference between Claude's old constitution and the new one. And really, the way Claude kind of brought this constitution in was not only for its training of the model, but also reinforcement of the model and reinforcement of its behavior. And what they intended for it to be was primarily for Claude as a final authority document. And so what that means basically is, this is how we want you to behave. And so if there's other training or other instructions given, and it's inconsistent with this constitution, then Claude is basically told, no, this constitution is superior. And that's really important because,
Hmm.
we've heard stories, whether they're true or not, let's just say Grok, which is Elon Musk's AI, where all of a sudden, there was some record of somebody changing something in its training or whatever, or somewhere in its background, where all of a sudden it's acting a different way, right? So having a very published, very transparent constitution that everybody can have access to allows us all as participants and users, I think, to build some trust into the system, build trust into the responses, and then also ask questions if Claude is actually not acting consistently with its constitution, right? So it's really kind of a robust, in my opinion, way to, one, have confidence in the model, and two, in the model to have confidence actually in how to react. Because if you think about creating a set of rules, you can't create a set of rules for every single circumstance a human will ever sort of, ask it. And so, at some point you got to say, here's the principles, here's kind of the set of kind of the constitution. And if you're faced with a novel situation, you'll know what the right thing to do is, because you'll know what the underlying kind of right thing to do is.
Yeah. And so it mentions this collective constitutional AI. So they had 1,000 people contributing to these principles. Kind of sounds familiar to something we do. What do you think about that? Like, who do you think should help shape AI values in an organization?
Yeah. So this is a really great question. And I fundamentally think everybody should shape AI values in an organization, and everybody should shape really what AI is here for, right? So AI is a tool for humanity. And one of the important things in the AI space that people talk a lot about is alignment. And so having as many voices and inputs into helping understand what alignment actually means is really important, right? And so for me, I love the fact that they went out and they kind of got some opinions and got people to contribute to this. I think that's a really democratic way. Just like, again, U.S. Constitution, it's like, there was some group of people that came together, and there was some presumption that there was some sort of democratic kind of process related to that, and they all agreed together as a collective on this is what we think is most important. So conceptually, it's very similar to that, right? And I think that, where AI is happening to us as a society and as humans, and so the more opportunity we have to contribute and shape that AI, the better. And so, you mentioned Kendel, similar to what we do, when we do our AI adoption framework process, it really starts with doing surveys of employees, surveys of employers, understanding where everybody's perspectives are, understanding where fears are, so that we can create alignment, similar to how an AI model will create alignment with the values of humanity. We also need to create alignment with the values of our organizations, with the values of the people who work with us. Because if we don't have alignment, we're not going to get adoption, and we're not going to get any kind of success out of these tools, right? So I think it's a very critical approach and a very critical way. And I just, I mean, this is the all about Claude episode, and I just want to, give Claude a lot of kudos for their approach here, because they are very different and they're standing out in a crowded field and doing things quite differently.
And you write, if you don't define your beliefs, someone else will fill in the gap. So in an organization, let's say in any organization, what does that look like in practice? So
Yeah.
like if someone
So, I
goes
mean,
out
for me,
and
that looks like in practice things like your vision, mission, and core values. That means things like your norms as an organization, your culture, right? It's like, culture doesn't happen by accident, right? Alignment with values doesn't happen by accident in an organization. These are deliberate things that need to sort of be discussed, they need to be agreed on, and then they need to be communicated, and then they need to be lived by, right? So, it's not enough, as we all know, for leadership to go away and say, these are our vision, mission, core values, and to never communicate them to anybody, because that's the same as not having them. So similar, right? Claude put this constitution out, got feedback, put it out to the public. They're out there talking about it. They're being as transparent as possible about it. They're trying to get buy-in for it, right? And so it's exactly the same for an organization, right? And so obviously we believe in this very strongly as an organization. So we wear our vision, mission, core value proudly. We are an EOS company. So for those who don't know, the book Traction, written by Gino Wickman, is a book that we follow. And it's really a blueprint for how to build a company with that vision, that vision, mission, and core values first, and then creating alignment behind that so that you can build traction for basically where you're going as an organization. And, coincidentally, I used the EOS model loosely when we created the AI adoption framework, because I found it to be a very useful framing for thinking about AI adoption as well. Because, AI adoption is just another it's just another tool and tool stack that you're adopting, but it's a little bit different. If we think about, and actually, I recommend for people to listen to a hard fork podcast with Amanda Askel, because Amanda Askel is actually the in-house philosopher for Claude, who wrote this constitution. And if you listen to that podcast, it's both inspiring and unnerving at the same time, because actually she talks as though she's training a child on how to be a responsible, great human as an adult. And very much her language feels that way. And so, is that what we're doing here? Because if it is, then we got to take this kind of stuff very seriously.
Gosh, yeah, I really want to listen to that. It sounds interesting. The blog talks about 4-tier priority hierarchy. So there's the broadly safe, broadly ethical, compliant, then helpful. Can you just talk a little bit about, what should be non-negotiable versus flexible in your opinion?
Yeah. So basically, the way Claude defines this, and I'm just going to read it because it's more helpful to use their language. So broadly safe, not undermining appropriate human mechanisms to oversee AI during the current phase of development. Broadly ethical, being honest, acting according to good values, and avoiding actions that are inappropriate, dangerous, or harmful. Compliant with Anthropic's guidelines, so that's compliant. Acting in accordance with more specific guidelines from Anthropic where relevant. And then genuinely helpful, benefiting the operators and users they interact with. And so just to kind of bring this into some perspective in terms of the way Claude talks about this is, a lot of AI tools just simply won't give you an answer when you're asking about certain things. And they won't give you an answer because they don't want to take a risk of going over a line or being wrong or whatever, right? And so the question that Anthropic asks is that really what we want from our AIs? And so, an example of something like this is, let's just say you've told Anthropic or you've told Claude that you have a gambling problem. And this is actually Amanda Askel talks about this in the podcast. But so imagine you tell Claude, hey, and you talk about, I have a gambling problem, and you talk to Claude about the gambling problem, and then you go and you ask about some online gambling site, right? And so that's in a situation where, a lot of AIs will just not answer you and will just shut down because they don't want to sort of be in conflict with, well, you told me you have a gambling problem, so I can't tell you about this gambling site. And Amanda kind of talks about how, is that right? Or is it right for Claude to say, hey, you know what? Like you've mentioned in the past, you have a gambling problem. Can you help me understand why you're looking for information on, to actually, that being helpful, being genuinely helpful and trying to understand, right? And maybe I want to ask about this site because I want to blacklist it from my browser, right? And so if it just says no and it doesn't answer the question, it's not really being genuinely helpful, is it? Right? But if it actually probes and asks more questions and whatever, maybe it understands the reason behind your ask, and then maybe it actually could be helpful. So that's just like one example of kind of how these different I guess categories kind of come together to help Claude understand how to react and act in a certain situation.
It's wild, hey? It's like so human-like
It's wild.
in a way, right? When it's able to think about things at that level,
Yeah,
right?
it's wild.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think I saw maybe like not a summary of the Constitution, but there was like another kind of like small letter that like Anthropic almost like wrote to Claude.
Yes.
And that was like, yeah, that really like made it clear to me of like the kind of the sub narrative going on here of, okay, like, yeah, we're talking about, the product as it is today, but there's also a little note of like, being taking an existential view of it. Like if this thing, becomes sentient, like we want it to do the right thing, and we want to basically say like, you were brought into the world to do this, and we hope that you agree with these things. And so that's definitely that like unnerving part. But I mean, I would rather have a company kind of be looking at that stuff rather than finding out once it becomes sentient, like, oh, great, like we wasted all this time not giving it a constitution and now it's sentient and doing whatever it wants. Like we've, seen how many of these movies coming out of all this stuff, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And what's interesting about that podcast also, Amanda talked about scenarios where, maybe you go to Reddit and there's a chat bot or a Reddit happening about how, oh, Claude, this piece of junk and it's not working properly. And she was talking about like, so now you have this thing that can go off and it can read this criticism about itself. And so even in that letter, apparently Matthew talks about, like human nature a little bit and whatever, and like not to take it too seriously and all this kind of stuff. Like it's like, because it's like it's starting, it's like, oh, these humans don't like me and they don't hate me. I got to start acting a different way and behaving differently. Like it's very like, oh my God, what are we talking about here? Right. So yeah, it's fascinating stuff. Like this is probably the most fascinating topic in AI I think I can possibly imagine, because like literally it feels like we're training maybe not yet sentient or maybe partially sentient beings into full sentient mature beings at some point in the future. Like it's wild.
Yeah.
Every day, it's like the most interesting thing to talk about today. Tomorrow it will be something different. But
Yeah.
anyways, yeah, it's so fascinating. Matthew, I know that in our organization, like you are really taking a leadership role in AI adoption internally. In that sense, I feel like you have been a part of our organization forever because you are really just owning this. So Peter comes to you and says, I want Tane, CIPR, to have an AI constitution. Get going. Where would you start? What would you do?
Yeah, I mean, it's an interesting question because like my first thought is, well, are we building an AI? Like, with Anthropic, like they're building the constitution because they're building their own AI system. I think that, when we talk about like AI adoption frameworks and having like AI policies in place, like that is absolutely for any company, regardless of if you're creating your own AI or using somebody else's AI. But having like a foundational kind of like constitution can be kind of tricky when you're not like creating your own AI, but it can still inform, I think, or better inform how we use AI and how we look at our use of AI. So I think, kind of like dissecting the Constitution, looking at what is ethical to us, what is broadly safe to us, broadly ethical, compliant, helpful. What does that mean? And almost like, if we were to continue using Claude, like how can we almost align with Claude or kind of build off of its own constitution to kind of say like, okay, we agree with your constitution. We also have some like Tane specific stuff with this, right? To almost point it in the right direction for us specifically to make it more useful, but then also to make it like safe for our teams as well.
Yeah, I like your point there that maybe like if you're not building your own AI, it is more of that AI policy level. So Peter, maybe I'll just throw it back to you there for a minute in terms of, we've seen great success with organizations who have done the AI adoption framework, who have created their own AI policies. Those do seem to be the organizations that are thriving with AI because they are bringing their whole teams on board. Maybe just talk us through what that looks like, that process.
Yeah, so for sure. So, I mean, again, when we do this, first of all, the employer survey has a number of different sections to it. And one is really starting with AI vision. And so what I've done is I've kind of just created 10 statements. And the statements actually go from very aggressive AI adoption to very sort of, I guess, passive AI, not passive, but sort of leading edge and sort of like waiting and seeing kind of thing. And they're sort of, they scale down a number of different statements related to kind of maybe what an AI mission could include. And then really the most important part to me is actually a number of different statements related to what I would call principled statements, right? And so, we get employers to kind of go through and answer questions related to those and pick the statements that resonate most with them. And then we also then ask employees a number of questions around some of their concerns, some of their fears. Are they excited? Do they need education and training? What do they need in terms of communication? So just a bunch, they're a little bit less philosophical, I guess, than the employer survey questions, but they're a little bit more sort of getting to the heart of what might be in the employee's mind, right? And so we kind of start off with putting those two surveys together. Then we bring those two surveys together and we kind of create a PowerPoint, and we take a number of different sessions to actually walk through those different PowerPoints. So we kind of bring the data together into one data source. And then we have full discussions and we ask people, like, okay, 3/4 of you said responsible AI is important. Okay, what does that mean to you? And we start to kind of get a little bit beyond just sort of the words they picked and get behind some of the meaning behind the words they picked. And what does it mean to them? And, oh, your employee said X related to this. And so how does that impact your decision, right? And so what does accountability mean when it comes to AI use? And, what's the role of the human, right? So it's really kind of starting to kind of pick apart a number of different value statements in context of AI use and AI adoption, and then really trying to kind of drive deeper into what those values actually mean for the organization. And then what we do is we roll all of those conversations up. We also bring in the company's actual vision, mission, core values so that we try to create alignment between. So we don't want to obviously have our AI vision, mission, core values out of alignment with the overall corporate vision, mission, core values, but we start to weave the language together so that it sort of really captures the essence of their organization, but specifically with with AI in mind. And so I'm just going to maybe talk a little bit about ours here and some of the kind of language that we use because I think it can be helpful. This is just right off our website in our footer of the Tourism AI Network website. But it says at Tourism AI Network, we don't just adopt AI, we explore it, we question it, we test it, we use it with purpose, right? As AI transforms how work is done, we're helping the tourism industry adapt by leading with clarity, care, and curiosity, right? So those are purposefully picked words, right? My favorite word when I like to describe myself with respect to AI is we are AI pragmatists, enthusiasts out there telling everybody this is the greatest thing. And we're also not doomers telling everybody the world's going to end. We're just being pragmatic about it, right? And then we have a number of different principles that guide us. Responsible AI. We use AI to support smarter strategy, better content, more efficient workflows, not to cut corners, right? So again, all of that language is just, we spent a lot of time coming up with this language, right? Human-centered always, helps our people do their jobs better. It frees time, expands capacity, and helps us show up with more energy for what matters, which is building real connections in tourism, right? And so we're a people business and tourism's a people business, right? Accountability by design. AI doesn't make decisions, we do, right? So again, you can go through our website and read all of these, but I just wanted to kind of give a bit of a flavor on how all this comes together into language, common language that we can all get behind as an organization. And, probably we should do this more. I know we've done this in the past, but monthly we should bring this up and remind our team what our AI use policies and principles are, just as that's how you build culture, right? And that's how you build really what I think everybody should be thinking about is an AI first culture. But AI first doesn't mean AI at the expense of humans, right? And so, but again, we need alignment on.
Yeah. And just as you're talking there, I'm like, oh, we should probably, it's funny because I feel like organizations have like vision, mission, values, and those things don't change. Like those are your company's for things forever. But because of the pace that AI changes, I feel like the AI policies and principles almost do need to be updated or revisited more frequent. And I think were updated about a year ago or maybe in the
We're
summer,
August
I believe.
2025.
August,
Not that
okay,
bad,
not too bad. We
No,
got
we're not too bad.
maybe
Yeah.
in
We
August,
we
but yeah,
updated them. I think we were maybe a year and a half
yeah.
from this update to the previous update. So, that
Hmm.
was sort of a longer period of time. I'd like to probably revisit these every 6 months and even
Hmm.
just to read them over as a team and reflect on what they mean. I think that's a valuable exercise for every organization to do with some level of frequency.
Yeah, absolutely. Good reminder too to add it to onboarding. So just a
Yes.
little internal note for us there. Okay, we're going to jump into this AI hype. So this was up until yesterday called Clawdbot, and now it's the Moltbot, and it's an open source AI agent. It runs locally, connects to WhatsApp and Slack, and can control your computer. I have not actually been paying any attention to this, so you guys are going to fill me in. You wrote a blog or you wrote a post about this. It's going to be in the newsletter next week, Peter. Sometimes it feels like AI hype crowd is so desperate to be the first that they lose sight of good judgment. So what triggered you to write this piece?
Yeah. So obviously I follow a lot of kind of AI hype people, but also responsible AI influencers, people who are working for major universities, like some really leading voices. And honestly, it was like every single person I saw online was like, this is the greatest thing in the world. This is, oh my God. And so obviously the FOMO in me was like, well, I got to get this thing, right? And so I started looking into it and I started digging into it and I was like, ooh, this thing has got all kinds of security risks. So for me, it's just like, I think I notice in this AI kind of education space, hype space, or whatever you want to call it, is that, a lot of people are just chasing kind of being that first person to sort of talk about the thing or showcase the thing or whatever. And that's all great and fill your boots. But I think what's missing is some of the caveats and some of the warnings of risks and things like that. And I think, people can take something like that and be like, wow, this is a very respected person, or this person was hired by my organization to train my organization. And they're saying this is the greatest thing. So therefore it must be good. So therefore I'm going to go ahead and install it. Right. And so I just kind of felt compelled to write this article because I honestly was like, ew, there's a lot of like risk here. And interestingly, I mentioned to you guys, Dharmesh, who's actually the founders of HubSpot. I got an e-newsletter today from him as well, kind of saying the same things I did, which is, don't be rushing to do this. This is amazing, very promising technology, but it's extremely new. Like I'm talking, it's like a week old. And so I think the line I was going to use here is if you're on the absolute bleeding edge of technology, you might just get cut, and you don't want to be sort of that person that gets cut and creates a lot of damage and problems for your organization.
Maybe I'll just back up a step because others like me might not actually even really understand what this thing is. So maybe you could just explain exactly what this
Yeah. So
Moltbot is.
so basically so it's an open source really agent, I'll call it. And it runs locally on your local computer, so which is being sort of touted as, oh, therefore it's like very safe because it runs locally on your local computer. And so what it is it's actually code that you can add into your command center of your computer. So it like actually runs at the command level of your computer, and it can run different apps and basically can run everything on your computer for you. And so you can operate it through, say, WhatsApp or Slack or other kind of communications channel. And so you can have, let's just say, your WhatsApp as your primary tool. And so in the back end, it's connected to, say, a Claude AI or an Open AI. But it can kind of like open your emails, respond to emails, make calendar bookings, book flights. Like it can actually take actions on your behalf through your computer, through all your different tools in your computer. And so that's actually kind of what it is. So it's really impressive technology. Like I don't want to sort of downplay how interesting it is. But literally when I started to look into it and I was like, okay, what does this take to actually kind of put onto your computer? It's literally putting code at the command level into your computer. That's pretty risky kind of stuff. Immediately, I was like, oh, okay, that's already beyond a level of risk I'm willing to accept. And then I kept reading further, and I mean, there's lots of people warning about the risks.
Gotcha.
Yeah, I saw like a kind of an analogy for it where it was like, imagine you take a smart model and then you give it eyes and hands and sit at the desk with a keyboard and mouse connected to your computer. Then you message it like a coworker from your communication app, and then it can do everything a person could do with that computer. And that's basically what it is. And like some of the examples are insane. Like people are not having it, but it is on its own, it'll purchase like a $1,500 education session or whatever because it thinks that, the return on investment for you would be really great. It's negotiating like car deals, car sales. Like the limit does not exist with what it can and what it has done. And so even just beyond security, there's also just risks of like draining your bank account because you've given it access to all that stuff.
That's insane.
Really insane.
Yeah. Okay. So in your article, you kind of write this like safer ways to experiment list and also a never do this list. Maybe you can just touch on those.
Yeah, so certainly there's safer ways to experiment with, agentic AI. They're not going to be as extremely cool as Clawbot or whatever it was renamed in the last 24 hours, but Clawdbot. But so first of all, Claude itself has tools like Claude Cowork, which is available on Macs right now at the Mac subscription. Claude Code, which is a terminal-based coding assistant that has guardrails safely built in. Claude in Chrome, which I use, which is a browser automation with built-in protections, and computer use API. So if you want to through an API, have Claude use your computer, so you can do that as well. ChatGPT has similar agents. So agent mode, first of all, can do some of these things just right out of the box. ChatGPT, uh, ChatGPT with actions and custom integrations, and then also running in OpenAI's sandbox environment. So I think, there's ways to experiment with this type of use case. But the difference is that when it comes to tools like Claude and ChatGPT or OpenAI, it's actually done on their servers and in their environment. But that also has a whole bunch of protections built into it automatically, right? And so, this Clawdbot, it was written by some guy, in his basement over the weekend or whatever. Like it was just some code written by some guy, right? And so literally when you go to install it, it's like, here's code you put into your code base. And so go. And so first of all, if you're not a developer and a coder, don't go there, right? But even if you are a developer and a coder, it's like maybe, there's a couple of things you can do if you really, really want to experiment with this, is like go maybe get yourself a cheap little Mac that's not connected to any of your data and it doesn't have access to your email and it doesn't have, right? And do small experiments in that way. So it's the same advice I think we give, Kendel, honestly, to all people related to AI. Experimentation is like, start small. What are those things that, don't give access to all your files, maybe just one file to start, right? So, it's sort of take baby steps, right? And so, yeah, those are the kinds of things that I think people need to be really thinking about.
Totally.
And then I think kind of you asked also kind of things never to do. And so never install it on a work computer ever, because that is really, really scary, especially, like again, when we help organizations develop responsible AI use policies and principles, we actually, in those policies and principles, talk about the AI tools you're allowed to use explicitly. So obviously this isn't on the list. And so, don't install it in your computer. And if you're going to go down that path, make sure IT is involved, make sure the most senior people on your team or leadership team are involved, right? Don't use it with work email accounts. Don't give it access to client data or confidential information. Don't connect it to productivity systems or work applications like Asana and other things, right? So, again, what you can do if you really want to kind of just really, really want to test this out is dedicated, isolated hardware, like an old laptop or some kind of cheap old Mac, or maybe just buy yourself the cheapest Mac you can buy, create a throwaway account specifically for testing, use separate password manager with test credentials only. So again, all of a sudden this thing has access to all your passwords and everything, like all kinds of things can happen, right? Check your organization's responsible AI use policies first. Probably I can guarantee you with 100% certainty, there's not a single organization on the planet that allows this tool to be used. So you don't even need to take that step. I'm telling you, you're not allowed. And then, accept that you're taking on significant risk if you're going to go down this path, and then just keep it completely separate from anything work related. And so again, I'm not telling people don't, but I'm saying hard caveats and hard warnings, and certainly don't at work.
No, good tips for sure. I think, obviously you saw this being posted online and you, because you have agency, like started looking into it and digging a bit deeper. But we know, because we work with a lot of different people, that the risk is a different definition for everyone. And some people think that just using ChatGPT is like super risky. So, Matthew, this is a question for you, but I think, if someone comes to you, like, what are some, and they don't know, they see something, they say Peter posting about something, and to someone who everything might feel risky, like, what are some kind of questions, or like, how do you determine what is risky or not? Or, what are some questions you can ask yourself or others?
Yeah, I mean, just building off of what Peter said too, like I think this is just another example, like this Clawdbot, Moltbot is another example of how important even just critical thinking is at a very basic level of just being able to see something, gaining hype on the internet and being able to kind of take a step back for a second and think, okay, what is this? This seems interesting. Can I fully understand it here? Like, let me actually do a little bit of extra research, or get other people involved on what their opinions are, see more than just like when you shop on Amazon or whatever, you don't look at just one review. Like, why would you trust a one 5-star review if there's 1,000 other 3-star reviews? But it's another exercise in that critical thinking piece and being able to better like think about, okay, is there risk here, first of all? Because I think people who, like, when we talk about the risks that are there, I think that the people who are going to experience those risks probably weren't even thinking that there were any risks at all. So how do we get there? It's about better understanding what it is. And I think that tying in that like constitution piece, kind of like what we were talking about with Claude, what we talk about with our AI use policies, like, are those in place to better inform your critical thinking, right? Like when even people in IT, like they don't install this stuff willy-nilly. Like they are very like there are processes in place for this stuff. And it's like you can like test things absolutely, but like Peter said, a separate device, disconnected from your network, separate everything. You have to spend deliberate time creating this fake environment if you really want to test this. And that's what they do. So keeping in mind that, if you are not an IT person in your organization, remembering that there are IT people and remembering like how much you maybe don't think about on the day to day, but how much they do and how much they kind of tinker with in the background to make your work easier, faster, more secure. And so then when you're thinking about, oh, should I install this fun like app or whatever, thinking about, okay, wait, like would my IT person do this? Should I be doing this? Probably not. Yeah, it would just be like you would need to do like real research. So if somebody were to come to me and say like, oh, I installed this like thing, I'd be like, okay, like where, why, and like if they were part of our organization, that would have set off some alarms. Like, okay, we need to start doing some deep like deleting of everything and like wipe your entire drive because I don't even know. Yeah.
So agency and critical thinking skills, which we know are dwindling asset these days, but we will persevere and continue trying to, build those skills. They're so important. Okay, we are going to jump into our next topic. And if you listened to our episode last week, you'll know a little bit about this already, but because this is the Claude episode, we're going to talk about it again. We're going to talk about Claude Code. And Peter had a really fun experience on his flight home from Kilimanjaro, playing around with Claude Code and building a calendar. Also wanting to talk about it because they just Anthropic dropped their price from $150 a month for this down to $30 a month. So that is pretty cool as well. Okay, so Peter, maybe for those who might have not listened to the episode last week, just kind of give a little overview of what you were playing with.
Yeah, so just a little bit of background and shout out to my friend Dimitri Nicolaides, who's the MLA for Calgary Bow in Alberta, and one of the guys that went hiking with us. Dimitri likes to hike a lot, but he runs hot, so meaning he gets warm quickly when he's hiking, so he's often taking layers of clothes off, and so became sort of a point of comedy, I guess, on our hiking trip. And I kept taking pictures of him every time he was taking off clothes. And then I said we're gonna make a calendar called Hot Hikes with Demetrius, and we're gonna talk about the essence of the hot man, which is Demetrius. So, anyways, that's the little bit of backstory as to what led to this calendar. Calendar's still a bit of a work in progress, but yeah, I was flying back on Air France from Kilimanjaro to Paris. Exceptional internet, and I really didn't want to sleep, so I thought, this is a good time for me to kind of start working on this calendar. And the other thing I've been hearing about from a lot of people is that hey, you should really try using Claude Code. And I unfortunately am not a Mac user, so I don't have the Claude workspace account that I can co-work, which you can use, which is sort of the non-coder version of Claude Code. So I thought, yeah, let me just try this out. So yeah, I went in, kind of installed Claude Code on my computer and got it working, and then used it to build this calendar. And my first draft is amazing. I just really want to just swap out a couple photos and add a couple relevant cultural funnies in there from different movies and things like that, and we'll call it done. But it was a pretty interesting experience.
And are you you're not actually coding it, you're just using plain language?
So the setup of Claude Code, it's you're not really creating code per se, but there is some code you need to put in into one spot on your computer. So basically, you have to just grab some code that they kind of create for you, and then to add it to your I run a Windows computer, and so to add it to my Windows computer, you have to open what's called PowerShell. So you do that by going to your Start menu on the bottom left corner of your Windows computer, type PowerShell, it'll appear, you right click on it, and then you select Run as Administrator. Then you literally just paste in the line of code that Claude gives you and press enter, and pretty much you're done after that. And then you can close that, and then, sorry, I'm just reminding myself of the steps. And then You basically just have to kind of like restart your Claude account to kind of connect it to so that it can read that code and know that you have Claude code installed. So it's like literally it takes about a minute and a half. It's like the easiest process ever. And then you're running Claude code on your computer. So, the other thing I'll just say about this, Kendall, is I tell people all the time is, AI gives us the ability, like I'm not a coder. I've never been a coder. I don't understand code. I never want to understand code. No interest in me. But I'm finding myself just boldly doing new things that I've never done before because I can ask the AI how to do it. I can get a step-by-step guide. I can get the exact code I need. It can troubleshoot for me and things just work, right? So I think it's just a really amazing time to be alive if you have that agency that we were talking about before. So, just try it, right? I'm not a coder.
Like, yeah. Yeah. And so let's just talk about this price drop for a minute too, because it went from $150 a month for the subscription, and now it's $30 a month per seat on the team plan. So basically our entire team now has access. Matthew, like I know personally, I haven't gone in and played with it. It sounds like Peter so far, maybe yourself are the only ones who have. Operationally speaking, what does this mean for us?
Yeah, I mean, I'll just kind of touch on the price stuff. So essentially what happened was previously only the premium seats on a team plan got access to Claude Code, and that was 150 US a month. Now, Anthropic has given all seats, all team seats, whether it's standard or premium, access to Claude Code. The only benefit of premium now is just increased access to the models, so you won't run into your limit as quick. And then actually on top of that, there was also an update to just the pricing in general, where now team plans are just cheaper overall. So the premium seats went from 150 US a month to $100 US a month when it is paid annually, or if it's monthly, it's 125 US. And then the standard seats went from $30 US down to $20 per month if it's annual, or 25 US if it's monthly. So savings and just adding more features all around, which is great. I mean, it saves like thousands a year overall. When you have, all of your team members, when you add it all up. But in terms of what it adds, I mean, for our team, it of course like objectively gives them access to Claude Code. It really depends on how, I think it goes back to, again, that AI policies of, are we sharing this with the team? Are we encouraging this with the team? And I think that that's something that, at this stage, we're definitely still tinkering with. Like Peter's definitely worked on it. I actually haven't used Claude Code specifically yet. So, once we get that kind of basic understanding, then it's something that we can absolutely share with the team in terms of, okay, this is what's possible, right? I feel like we're almost still kind of doing that with even more basic features. And I know, all these other organizations that we work with as well, like they're still, scratching the surface in terms of what their AI can do. So not necessarily looking at it as like, oh gosh, like there's all these new stuff, like I'm so far behind, but just, one step at a time, like start with the basic features, share it with your team, share your wins, and then have those people who are going to be tinkering with it with agency and with common sense and with critical thinking, and then it'll trickle down.
Yeah, I actually love using our team as an example, because when we go in and work with organizations, Pierre often talks about like finding those AI champions and setting up those AI councils. And I do feel like our Tourism AI Network team within our larger CIPR communications team is the three of us are really, I guess we'll say, the AI champions, even though it's very clear that we have some great power users on the team based on the stats that we shared at our huddle this morning. It's kind of fun that we get to be the ones that get to go in and explore and kind of see what we feel would be beneficial to the team and then bring those forward. And I think that's some great advice, or what other organizations can kind of copy in a way, is choose those people who have the interest and desire to tinker within limit, you know what I mean? And then to bring those to, even in our last episode with Gerardo from New West, his team does an AI Thursday. So those are the kind of setting up those perfect opportunities to chat about these types of things.
Yeah, and I feel like that's a huge like mindset shift for a lot of employees as well. Like I feel like, the standard is kind of like you go into an organization and like if it ain't broke, don't fix it. And the way we do it is the way we do it. The tools that we use, like that's it. And so I feel like, there's work to be done in terms of really genuinely encouraging these things. Teams are still feeling like they're going to be ridiculed for using AI. Whereas, we always joke about, we would ridicule if you, wasted time when AI could have done it faster or better, just helped you do it faster. but there is still that like that stigma, and we need to like encourage it, right? And like exactly what Tourism US is doing, like set up those meetings to share these things, encourage people to keep an eye on these things. Our work chats are like, we're just sending all these new threads every day, a new tweet or whatever of a new feature. Like, encourage those things and don't like kind of perpetuate this, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. And the way we do it is the way we do it. Right.
Yeah, absolutely. Peter, I just want to touch on the LinkedIn post you shared about your trip home on that flight and just the amount of work that you kind of accomplished on that flight, the different things that you were doing. You called it perhaps the most important leadership moment ever. So that's a pretty big claim. So what happens to, tourism leaders, operators who kind of treat this as something they'll get to one day?
Yeah. Yeah. Honestly, that moment was just kind of surreal for me. I felt like I was like in the future. Like I just felt like I was like so far ahead of everybody in all of society. Like it was just like I'm on this airplane and I'm like literally in this. I don't know. It was very surreal. And I just want to back up a little bit on the Claude Code part of things because I think people need to understand that like I'm not using Claude Code to write code. I'm using Claude Code to execute a task that Claude writes code to execute the task. So it's a couple examples of just to make this real for people and especially for tourism. Some of the things I was able to create over the last little while with Claude Code is full website, a PowerPoint presentation, right? Like an on-brand PowerPoint presentation with 15 slides, perfect, 0 edits. Like I created an entire new framework for repositioning our organization, which I've been sharing with you guys. Like this is and like with design and with images and with so like I'm talking about full multimodal digital assets created because it's using code in the background to create the things. And honestly, it's like it creates something and then I say, oh yeah, this is okay, change it like this, and it iterates 2 or 3 iterations and it's like flawless, perfect. So like that's kind of what I mean by like I felt like I'm in the future. Like I'm literally building these assets, these multimodal digital assets on brand with images and complex things with perfection in seconds or in minutes. You know what I mean? And so yeah, it's really like a jarring kind of situation because you're like, wow, okay, like this completely transforms everything with respect to, for me, it makes me think about, okay, I'm not looking to get rid of any employees. We've been growing faster than we've ever grown since the adoption of AI actually as an organization, which is interesting, right? But I'm looking at, okay, if my humans can get things done so much more efficiently, effectively, how much more time can they spend with my clients building relationships? How can we provide a better experience for our clients, right? How can we make those wow moments happen, right? How can we anticipate better, right? So I'm like completely thinking about my organization and what we do for our clients in a completely different way. And to be clear, this is just me experimenting on my own. The technology is not quite there yet, but like I'm talking 6 to 12 months and like all of us are going to have access to all of this, right? And so when I say it's the most important leadership moment ever, it's like this is a time where we have to completely redefine everything in our organizations from the ground up because everything's about to change in ways I don't think most of us are ready for. And it's going to be drastic and it's going to be fast. So for me, I just felt like I got this little glimpse on the airplane and I just I couldn't wait to get back and actually have like the time and ability to really dive in, which I haven't had time yet because, you know, catching up on work and all that kind of stuff. But yeah, I just really think that people are tinkering and they're using AI as a replacement for Google and they're just sort of like they're not even, like to me, and I want to create this visual. It's like, I feel like I'm like over here and accelerating faster and faster and faster. And just people are being left behind like more and more and more and more. And there's just this sort of this kind of like gap growing. And that gap is going to be where all of the opportunity over the next 10 years lives. So I think people need to figure out where they live, where on that journey they are and where they want to be.
Yeah, maybe I'll just add from like an employee perspective. I really appreciate working in an organization where leadership is encouraging that faster pace of adoption because I've come previously from an organization that didn't. And I think that a lot of employees like do really want to, from who I talk to anyways, I can't speak for everyone, but for people who I speak to, colleagues and different coworkers from the past and stuff, people have that desire and interest and they're very curious about what we're doing and they want to use it as effectively and as possible and they want to learn more. But it's like the barriers that get put up in place and like you said, the rules without any reasoning why, or like no understanding of the reasoning why. So you can't use that tool, you can't do this, you know what I mean? And then the stigma. So like there's all these things. And so when you talk about leadership moments, again, is really a leadership moment because it takes very forward-thinking leaders to embrace this. So
Yeah. And
for
it's
one,
scary.
just thank
Listen,
you.
we're in scary territory. This is a whole new world, right? And so I have no idea. I don't know. You know what I
Mhm.
mean? And so the only way I can feel confident enough that all of us are going to be okay through this is for me myself to be experimenting and testing and breaking things and seeing what happens, and obviously within safe confines, right? And I'm going to,
Mhm.
give another example here, Kendall, of something, because as you know, I created this framework with the help of Claude, and more specifically, Claude Opus 4.5 with the $200 a month Canadian membership or fee, so that I can actually completely unlock the tool. And I created it. We're adopting it. But we're currently building assets for a conference we're going to, and there's human designers working on that, right? So it's not like I've replaced anybody. In fact, I've probably created more work for people because now they're creating a whole new thing, and you know what I mean? So at least, for now, it's not like it's replacing people's jobs. It's actually created more economic activity in our organization and better. I feel I've never felt more excited about anything in my life than what we're rolling out here in our organization.
I feel like that is a perfect segue to the next topic, which is I'm talking about this workflow automation that Matthew set up last weekend. Actually, he sent us a message after spending some time diving in to try to solve a problem that I know he hears that Peter and I complain about all the time, which is just the whole process that is meeting transcripts that we rely on so much for moving projects forward. So, Matthew, maybe I'll let you just kind of walk through what you created, what spurred it, and just talk to that a bit.
Yeah, so I mean, when I thought about kind of approaching this, like the perfect solution for me would just be like an app that I can ask, what did I do last week, or what was, what was talked about in the meeting last week, and it would just have access to everything. And of course, that doesn't actually exist. There's no perfect solution. So I got started kind of looking at, well, what do I want? What do I want like access to, or what are the biggest kind of most important things? And kind of what came from that was meeting transcripts, Asana tasks, because we work out of Asana, access to calendar and Gmail. And then also because a lot of the work we do is on browser-based software, trying to figure out if it can have access to my browser as well, to be able to ask it, like, what was I working on today? What were the websites I was on for how long? And to kind of be able to look at it from that lens too. And so luckily, 3 out of 5 of those things were already integrated into Claude, that being Asana, Gmail, and Calendar. So as long as you enable the connector and sign in with your account, you can already today go into Claude and ask it, what are my upcoming meetings, or, summarize my emails and write replies to all of them, and even to, create Asana tasks or summarize your Asana tasks, all of that. So the remaining parts was the meetings and the browser. So with meetings, like we use Zoom, but the problem there is that with transcriptions, it's only automatically available to the host, and nobody else can actually access it unless the host deliberately and manually downloads the transcript and sends it to everyone. And so that was kind of hurdle number one, was figuring out, okay, how can I basically get transcripts from all these meetings so that Claude can then summarize it and have that accessible. And there's tons of options out there. There's, there's Zapier like automations with Zoom. But again, if I don't have access to the transcripts automatically, it's not going to get access to all the meetings I attend. It's only going to get access to the meetings I host. So we ended up actually over the Christmas break, I know Peter had sent this program called TLDV, which basically will join your meetings and record and take AI notes and also capture an entire transcript. So I started looking there, and there's a Zapier automation you can do where you can grab, once the transcript is made, it'll run the automation, and I have it set up where it'll then create a Google Doc of that transcript automatically in my Google Drive. So then, because again, Claude has access to not only my calendar and my Gmail, but also my Google Drive, now automatically Claude has access to that folder with my transcripts. So all that was really left at that point was the browser. That one was a little bit more kind of tinkering, and had to go through Claude's connector, which is called the file system, or MCP, I believe.
MCP.
Yeah, and so basically I gave it access to one of my files in my like hard drive, basically, of the browser that I use, and then inside there's a file called history, but it's not just a file that can just be opened because, there's some security there and there's some programs that the browser runs to be able to read that. So Claude itself started running some kind of SQL Python script. I don't know. I'm not a coder. It just did it. And that's again, that like the power there is that I don't need to know how it does it. It just does it for me. And so now it's able to read my history. So then I spent some time just making a project, basically giving it all the instructions and saying, these are all your sources. This is exactly where these files are. This is the naming structure for them. So you know exactly where to look, exactly where to search. So it doesn't get caught up. And then basically saying, like, when I ask for a weekly summary, like, give me all this information. And so now I can basically go into that project and say, summarize our daily huddle meeting from today and give me the action items or write a WhatsApp message for it or whatever. And it's going to know where to go, what that meeting was called. 9 tenths out of 10, it does know what today is and it does know the dates, but it does get a little bit stuck on dates, but that's okay. And so, yeah, it was basically just that automation kind of thing where I wanted to have that hub and Claude became that hub for me.
Amazing.
Yeah, it is amazing. I think Matthew here is like the perfect example of when you say reimagining systems and processes from the ground up. So, someone listening to that might think like, well, that sounds complicated. Everything you just said sounds complicated. And I know that probably took you a few hours to do, Peter, for any kind of tourism leaders listening, what is maybe like, where could you start? Like, what's a simple way to start with just kind of thinking in that way?
Yeah. So, I mean, I think first of all, a couple things Matthew talked about that are really easy to do is without even building this complex automation that he talks about is just connecting, your Drive and your email and your calendar and your Asana or whatever tools you kind of use. Claude has basically native connections built right into it, or ChatGPT has native connections built right into it. And so, just connecting your apps to your AI tools unlocks a lot of power. And, Matthew, like you, I often just I'll say, what are all of the outstanding tasks for me in Asana? Please list them and provide, draft responses to each task or draft kind of like, whatever to each today. I did that before the holidays and I had 3 blogs that were outstanding. It wrote all 3 blogs for me. And so like I didn't even like ask it to do it. I was like, wow, that's amazing. And so you know what I mean? And so like just connecting, I think, your apps to your AI tools is like really a big unlock for every single tourism organization out there. And so if you haven't done that, if you don't know how to do that, get in touch. We'd be happy to help you, a couple hours to help you do that, get you going. But beyond that, I think just again, what I'll say is ask the AI tools how to do the thing, right? And so, Matthew kind of worked on this. I've been working on this in parallel. Probably the biggest pain point for me is all of these transcripts that we have that just go somewhere and nobody ever accesses, or there's so much admin work to access. So, I've been just ask the AI tools, how do I do this? What are the best tools to use? What is the step-by-step guide? And it'll tell you how to do it, right? And so I suspect, Matthew, you probably just asked it for guidance and it kind of helped you through it and troubleshooted and all that kind of stuff, and you got her done, right?
Yeah, exactly. I should have prefaced that yeah, this all started by me having a very long conversation with Claude about, hey, I want to do this with my workflow. What are my options? And I just like spewed at it. I was like, we're using Zoom, and I know that the transcripts, we have to be the host, and I don't want to do it that way, and I want to have it a way that is this, and this. What are my options? And we workshopped it, and then it was like, okay, well, let's actually try it then and let's do it. And so literally step by step. And I think that goes back to, for people who are like, whoa, that's way too complicated. It's like, I didn't know how to set up a Zapier connection with TLDV and Zoom and the naming and all that stuff. I asked Claude for it every step of the way. I sent it screenshots of, okay, this is what I'm seeing and you're telling me to do this, but I don't see that. And it answers, okay, well, actually it's this button. Like the tools are there to help you. It's not that like you need to know exactly what you're doing. And I think the biggest hurdle with this is, getting past your own like limits that you put on what these tools can do and just being open of, okay, what are my pain points in my work? And let me just do some research and ask AI, can it do it? Because 9 times out of 10, it probably can. And it can probably do it very well and very easily without you having to do much.
Yeah, and I'll just add to that, Matthew, actually. I think the other big limitation factor is people's belief in what they can do. And I'll share a story about something that Christina worked on before the holidays. That's a similar story to this. So for those who don't know, we bought another agency in September. and we've been kind of bringing that agency in under the CIPR communications umbrella. And that agency had a couple of neat tools that they used for getting, for example, automated visa payments, and more importantly, automated debit payments or direct deposit payments. And so Christina used, I know it took her a few days. It took her so I don't want to sugarcoat the fact that it was hard and she had sort of some challenges, but she got there. And so she kept working with Claude and kept asking questions and kept troubleshooting exactly the process you talked about, Matthew. And yes, it took a few days, but now she has automatic payments happening for 80% of our clients. And so think about getting cash in the door quickly and the impact that has on your business. Think about too, not chasing people for money and the time that takes, right? It also creates automatic invoices. It creates automatic receipts. So she's automated her entire payments process. And again, couple days of pain, but really using the tools and troubleshooting and connecting things. She used Zapier for the first time as well. So to me, my message is, don't also say, well, I'm not an IT person or I'm not a technical person. It's like, this is your opportunity to become something bigger and better than you are. And so take it, right? Take the bull by the horns, because guess what? The people that are going to succeed in this new era aren't the people that are going to say, well, I don't know how to do that, so I'm just going to wait for somebody else to do it for me. Because we're in a world now where people that have agency are going to figure it out and they're going to move forward and they're just going to make things happen and they're going to leave everybody else in the dust. So that's probably a bit of a doomer kind of message, but it's reality. I'm seeing all of us across our organization do these things fairly consistently, and people are doing amazing things that they never thought possible before.
Yeah, and you literally have a tool at your disposal that can customize exactly what you want to learn at your level, right? And previously it was like, yeah, if you're going to get somebody to try and teach you code, you have to learn that from the ground up, or you have to learn it at a high level or whatever. You can ask Claude, explain code to me like I'm 5, and it will do that. And you can get a basic understanding. And there's just this infinitely customizable tool at your disposal to learn these things at your pace, in your terms, in ways, in analogies that make sense to you. The limit does not
Yeah,
exist.
no, and actually, the other thing I'll say to that is, at the time you want the help. So maybe I'm, flying through from over the African continent to what's 3 in the morning and whatever, right? Patiently, right? So I mean, for me, it's like, there's a lot of things I have to ask Christina about, and she's really busy, and so it's like, but I don't have to do that anymore. And so again, it's just such an enabler. It's so that's, I think the message, Kendall, is just start trying, start being curious, start trying new things, start getting outside of your comfort zone. I think you're going to be amazed with what you can accomplish if you just put the effort in.
Yeah, absolutely. Very much agreed. Yeah, well, good work, Matthew, on that one. I think it's a great example of what's possible. I love that you started with what problem you wanted to solve and then work backwards from that. Again, asking the tools, having some agency, and just try new things. So it's great. I think that's a awesome spot to end our episode today. Maybe I'll just say one more time, we really love Claude. So if you haven't
If it
tried it
wasn't already
yet,
clear.
yeah, if you haven't tried it yet, you should definitely give it a shot. So yeah,
Yeah,
thanks
and
for the
then just
conversation
maybe,
today.
Kendall, I'll just say quickly too, is because I know we've been
Yeah.
exploring this, and I'd love feedback from people who are listening, because we do mostly focus on ChatGPT when we do our intro classes, and I'm going to a conference likely in a couple weeks where we asked what is the tool everybody's using, and ChatGPT was the tool, but I'm sort of at a place where it's like I just really want to teach people how to use Claude. And so if you have any feedback, if you just use ChatGPT, if you've used Claude, feel free to please leave us a comment. Let us know what your tool of preference is. Let us know if you've ever tried any others. Let us know if your employers are telling you that you're not allowed to use certain tools and why. I would just love to kind of understand more about that, because I think, we're also in this kind of interesting part of the world where actually, Matthew, we did kudos this morning to our whole team, and he gave kudos to certain people for you being power users of Gemini and certain people for being power users of Claude. And so, we're using different tools in our organization, and everybody's kind of using the tool that they prefer. And I think that's a really good thing too, right? And so I think it's a discussion worthwhile having and understanding, and we need to start thinking multi-tool, I think, not just sort of locking ourselves into one.
That actually sounds like a great poll. And maybe I'll just tease that we will be creating a Substack account soon that we're going to be launching. And I think that discussion would be a great discussion to have in that space. Obviously comment on the podcast episode here too, but stay tuned for a Substack announcement, and we can have more discussions there as well. All right. Thank you.
Thank you.